they're not going to get to the roots at Harvard. They're not going to get to the roots at Northwestern. They're not going to get to the roots in the medical system because they're looking with the wrong lens. The answers lie in a different kind of doctor who's got a different kind of philosophy and perspective that allows them to see the science more clearly.
Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started.
All right, parents, welcome back to this episode. It's another solo deep dive, which means I'm going to take a condition, a certain neurological challenge, or a lot of times I'll take a certain, I guess, what would you call it, component of the nervous system and dive deep into the science behind that. So this conversation today is about regressive autism. So it's about autism, but it's about the category, the type of autism. There's technically 3 levels of autism. We covered that into our earlier episode, which is a deep dive into all things autism. Well, this one's going to get very specific into regressive autism, but I really want every parent, don't tune this out yet if your child doesn't have autism. Don't tune this out if your child's autism was kind of always there versus regressive, which we'll talk about. Hey, everything was going pretty well, or what seemed like, that's the key here, all the way well until 10, 15, 18 months, and then my child started to regress and lose speech and so forth. I'm telling you, what you're going to learn about sensory processing in this one is worth staying for everyone, even if your child doesn't have autism. What you're going to learn about neurodevelopment and just kids' health, period, is worth staying all the way through this one, because this is going to be a mind-blowing one. And I'm going to come right out of the gates and say it. Just before recording this solo, right here in the studio, I just got done interviewing an incredible woman that I've worked with, an incredible professional, a doctor of physical therapy, pediatric specialist, not just a pediatric specialist, but she specializes in the toughest neurological cases, just like we do, Miss Beth. And in that conversation, we talked about a kiddo who we worked on. It was one of our first collaborative cases, and that's what that whole episode is about. Maybe by the time this one comes out, that one already will. I never know the timing. I'm just kind of in here in the studio getting after it, and our incredible team lines them up and gets them out to you guys. But we talked about a kiddo who we started doing collaborative care, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and here's the most important thing for all of you, and neurologically-focused chiropractic at the young age of 4 months for this child, because we had very clear early signs of autism. Now, I'm pulling things apart very slowly here. We, on our team, because we work with these kids every single day, and we look more granular, more close, more detailed, more analytical than any other provider on earth. We knew this child was heading into the storm. We knew this child was heading towards autism. The conventional pediatrician wouldn't have caught a single one of the multitude of things that we found. And I'm going to teach you what those early signs and early warning signs and early triggers of autism are, because they actually do occur in nearly every single case of regressive autism as well. But no one else told you to look for them. No one else told you they were important. And even if they told you they were important, nobody probably explained the neurophysiological science to explain why they're important and actually close that loop for you, so you know, holy heck, if we have these things happening with our kiddo, even though the conventional medical system and everyone else is going to dismiss them as normal, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. Oh, you're just being a helicopter mom. Don't worry, they'll be fine. The neurology tells us something different. And what Beth and I were talking about after we got done recording that episode, and we talked all about this kid's case and many others in that one, is we said these words. We collectively, this care team, this collaborative care team, prevented autism for that child. Now, here's what I care about. your child. Here's what I care about. You getting the full, detailed, granular, advanced, here's what we know about neuroscience of autism and neurodevelopmental conditions today. I don't care if that takes somebody and it chaps their hide significantly, because if somebody gets upset by that instead of excited about that, then they are closed to the opportunity of helping your child heal. And you don't need them on your team anyways. Everybody on your team needs to start, and you can call this as wonky and weirdo and non-scientific as you want. By the way, there's tons of science to support how important this is as well to everything. You need everybody on your team to believe entirely in your child's healing capacity and not put limits on it. So it is entirely essential to the conventional medical system still today. And in fact, they probably are pushing harder against healing today than ever before, because if you're going to blame genetics, if you're going to blame bad luck, if you're going to say we don't know why some kids get autism and we definitely don't know why some kids regress into autism, if you're going to play that card, we don't know why, you need to play that card in order to protect yourself for not being able to do anything to help it. If your whole goal when you wake up in the morning and go to bed at night is to figure out what it takes to help these childs heal and achieve optimal outcomes in recovery, and if you're comfortable, not just comfortable, but let's just call a spade, if you're brave enough and forward enough to have that conversation, and you are as a parent, so I am going to be as your what's my role here? I don't get to take care of every single year, kiddos. I won't get to be officially every one of your child's pediatric chiropractors and be on your team, but I strongly consider myself on your care advocate team, your hope dealer team, your science explaining, dots connecting team. And I can't help you do any of that if I don't come out of the gates with this episode right here and tell you we've done it for many kids. In the rest of the world, by the way, it's entirely accepted to have that conversation. It's called early intervention. But with autism, because autism is a son of a gun, with autism, they stop short of saying prevention. They stop short intentionally of saying recovery and optimal outcomes. And when they talk about early intervention, which in pretty much every state, every community, everywhere, you can get early intervention for OT, with OT and speech and PT and developmental therapy, but you can't yet get neurologically focused chiropractic care on early intervention. So the cases I have to teach you from, and where I have these cases is where we've really learned to go look at the science and marry up what we're seeing clinically with what we see in the research. Because by the way, you can't just rely on what you see in the research, and you can't just rely in what you see in clinic. And so what I do is I live both lives simultaneously. I am in practice seeing miracles happen, and I am in the research making sense of it. And now I'm in the studio sharing it on the podcast, and I'm going to teach you stuff that no one else has. And I'm spending 5 to 10 minutes out of the gates. Go ahead and putting that bold statement out that says, we know what's causing this. We know the multifaceted triggers. We call it the perfect storm. We know what the aggregate is, the most common triggers of these challenges. We know that they occur earlier, way earlier than the conventional system knows. And so we know to look there, and then we know what sequence and what order these stressors, this perfect storm, or what we're going to also introduce here today, the toxic load theory, really does. And when you know to look for these things earlier, let's call it further upstream in development, then you'll know this. For kiddos that regress into autism, and I have been able to care for hundreds of kids in my clinic, probably thousands by this point. I'm not a good tally taker. I just see patterns, not necessarily spreadsheets. And we have taken in-depth case histories on hundreds, if not thousands of cases of regressive autism, and a term I'll introduce here and explain big time in the middle, called neurological exhaustion. So cases where development just stops. Development just falls off the metaphoric cliff. And we're going to come back to that too. We're going to talk about a sympathetic neurological cliff, that these kids' nervous systems get so overwhelmed and so full of stress and so full of toxicity, it literally, actually, neurologically overwhelms their body and brain, and they just stop developing. And when you stop developing, development is all about momentum. You're either going forward or you're going backwards. You cannot be in a stuck state, really, physiologically. You cannot be in a static state neurologically. So that's why it's called regressive, because time goes on. The child keeps getting older. So more milestones, more speech, more socialization was supposed to come online. And it not only stopped, the child's brain and nervous system not only stopped developing, but things that maybe they had developed fall off the cliff as well. I'm going to explain all of that. And I will tell you, out of the hundreds and thousands of case histories I've taken of kids who would fit this category. So they say right now, 1 in 36 kids has regressive autism. The research, which again, we're going to use it on every single episode for enough utility. The research itself is not enough to make sense of this. You need to combine what happens in white papers, what we learn in white papers, and what happens in practice. Okay. That's how I can help your family the most. If you talk to researchers only, they don't have all the answers because they don't actually apply the work to see if it works or not. And if you talk to application clinicians only, they don't have all the answers either because they don't get to slow down enough and really make sense of the research. Most practicing doctors haven't read research in a decade. Okay. For whatever reason, God made me different. I don't really enjoy Netflix. I love watching sports and then reading neuroscience journals. I love taking care of patients and hanging out with my family and then reading neuroscience journals and making sense of this and going to my whiteboard and drawing out perfect storm equations and coming up with this way to make sense of it clinically, myself first to help our patients, train other chiropractors second to help thousands and soon millions of patients. And now God has us doing this, taking this stuff that we've been able to synthesize together, all these different worlds. Medicine is over here, research is over here, chiropractic is over here, parents are over here. And this podcast is the one place, the one platform that is going to bring it all together and make it make sense for you. I promise. That's my job. That's my promise. That's what we will deliver. And so let's get this one going. So if 1 in 36 kids has autism, and they say 20 to 30% of kids qualify under this regressive autism criteria, let's go deep into those weeds, because when we talk about regressive autism, you're actually going to see the full, complete picture of autism, period. Because children who never regressed because they never progressed. They never progressed. They never got moving forward. So their journey to autism was more apparent or more obvious. And that one's not good, but there's something extra difficult. There's something extra painful for parents, and I haven't gone through it. So my empathy, I've gone through all sorts of challenges with Oliver and other stuff, even with the girls, but I've never gone through this one exactly. So I'm not going to pretend ever. I will never say, oh yeah, I relate, when I haven't literally lived that exact life, and I can't stand when people do. But I've been close enough to this pain of my child facing a grave neurological prognosis in future to feel it in a large way. But then there's something unique about a child whose motor planning was coming online. And then most importantly, when we think of regressive autism, we think of nonverbal autism. We think of level 3 autism. All of a sudden, their speech just stops. Their socialization, their emotional regulation, and their communication just falls off the cliff, and it's no longer there. And that is, there's no other words to say other than the ones that are what we need to say. That is so heartbreaking. That is so, leaves a parent in such amount of distraught and frustration and emotional, just, it's hard to describe, right? So to get you your hope back, let me get you the science and the steps that were probably at play before they fell off the cliff, before the regression set in. Because in all of those case histories I've taken, there's only one, maybe two I can think of where in my analysis, there wasn't clear, very obvious signs of trouble brewing. Now, I've got to pull the hairs on this. We look at case, if I say that we look at case histories differently than a conventional pediatrician or even a conventional early intervention therapy team, to use the word different is the greatest understatement ever. They are looking for symptoms. We are looking for root cause. if you don't go all the way upstream, actually when you study epigenetics, you can actually look into the familial history, not just genetics. That's just a real obvious 1994 way of looking at things. Okay. We're no longer in 1994. All right. No Marty McFly. I always bring him up. We're not going back in the DeLorean and going to use research that has been disproven, the whole genetic, it's only that theory. And finally, the medical world has woken up and said, okay, autism is a combination of genetics and environmental influences. And then they never open the hood on environmental influences and actually go deep down that road. We are going down that road. And when you do, and you swim far enough upstream into the child's case history, so their pre-pregnancy journey, fertility journey, pregnancy, labor, delivery, and early childhood, I'm telling you, we're going to go through each of the early signs that are more obvious. Like you can go to other autism websites and you can find these are now early signs of autism. Awesomely, we are recognizing it better. There are earlier signs that other providers are looking for as well. But still today, if it's not a PX doctor, if it's not a neurologically focused chiropractor, they don't know to look for the perfect storm ingredients of fertility challenges, high stress pregnancy, and birth interventions and birth trauma. Those are the things that lead to a child have difficulty nursing, difficulty latching, difficulty turning their neck, soothing, sleeping, digesting. Kind of put that all together, it's colic. Those kids don't grow out of colic. They grow into things like continued sleep challenges, gross motor delays, sensory processing issues, chronic ear infections that comes with antibiotics and now starts to take the perfect storm and turn it into the toxic load, which is really the same thing. And now they start to be filled with inflammation. Now they start to be filled with medication. We have to be ready and willing to have the conversation about vaccination and why some kids have such significant reactions to them when others don't. It's not just, you can't look at things in a vacuum and say, oh, net good, net not good. You have to be able to take care of each kid individually. And that's the biggest issue. By far, like if we wanted to really take a foundational issue with our conventional medical system, and if you understand this foundational issue, you can then have the conversation from here about everything else, including the V word. And that conversation is this: not every kid is the same. Not every kid is the same genetically. Not every kid has the same fertility journey. Not every kid has the same prenatal development, what's called fetal development. Some pregnancies are very high risk, very high stress, there's metabolic conditions, there's medical conditions. So if the mom's nervous system and physiological system is under a lot of stress, that child's development is going to be affected. We know that. That just makes sense, common sense, and the research now shows it, versus a pregnancy that hopefully, optimally is, and remember, got to sneak a joke in here, I'm a dude. So when I say a pregnancy that goes smoothly and easily, thankfully, we're on a podcast and none of you rock star women can punch me in the face by saying the word easily as it applies to pregnancy. I only mean to say it in contrast to so many of them in today's world where we've disempowered and stressed the heck out of women. And then we expect them to get pregnant without intervention. Well, they're so stressed, their nervous systems are so depleted, this certain subset, a way bigger subset than we should have and want to have, with anxiety and hormonal issues and thyroid challenges and adrenal issues and gut challenges. So their neurophysiological system is a mess. So then they require intervention to get pregnant. Awesome. Thank goodness God gave us. That's a miracle when used appropriately. But there ain't a single intervention that doesn't come with side effects. So what we find all the time in regressive autism cases is things like IVF, things like fertility challenges, things like a high-risk pregnancy, things like C-section, vacuum, forceps, epidural, emergency or scheduled C-sections, difficulty nursing, colic, constipation, chronic ear infections, eczema, multiple rounds of antibiotics, and skipped crawling, and alterations, subtle but important, delays and differences in gross motor development. And that's why some words, some things are coming out, because the child's brain is trying to compensate and trying to go into development. So sometimes for 6 months, for 12 months, for 18 months, if you look at it just from a 30,000-foot view, which is all the conventional pediatrician told you to look at, hey, look at this chart, look at this poster, fill out this paperwork. Guys, for them to find a warning sign, and I know it sounds like I'm just throwing them down all the time, but this is just the system we have. Unless the neurosensory, neurodevelopmental challenge is literally smacking them in the face, they miss it. They miss most torticollis, they miss most plagiocephaly, and they definitely miss sensory and autism brewing. because they're trained to say, oh, we don't really need to worry about this until later, and it's genetic anyway, so even if we caught it, what would we catch? There's nothing to do. And that is simply not the case. So I'm already into the meat of this episode, if you've picked it up, because those things I've now whipped through 2 times, the fertility challenges, the pregnancy challenges, the labor and delivery challenges, the colic, the constipation, the chronic ear infections, the antibiotics, and the medications, the steroid medications, all these different things. And then the other medical intervention that rhymes with medications. As all of this stress, intervention, and toxicity adds up, it overwhelms a child's nervous system and it shifts it into sympathetic dominance. So what does sympathetic dominance look like? What is another word for this we're going to use? There's a bunch of words we're going to use interchangeably for the rest of this one, and we use them on pretty much every podcast episode. Like if you listen to every podcast episode, and I know many of you do, what's up? I love you. Thank you. You're the best. If I gave you a set of flashcards and I asked you to define these things, you'd be like, I think he means the same thing when he says great work, podcast guy, says a bunch of these different words. Subluxation. That is the neurologically-chiropractic word for sympathetic dominance, nervous system dysregulation, nervous system dysfunction, and nervous system imbalance or interference. I know that's a bunch of things. They all kind of mean the same thing. Another catch-all term that needs to be researched like crazy with autism, because it explains autism better from a neurophysiological standpoint than anything else we could ever go deep down the road with research on, is a term called dysautonomia. And what happens when this stress, when all these stressors, from fertility to pregnancy to labor and delivery to early infancy, when there's difficulty nursing, when there's difficulty soothing and sleeping and digesting, when they have difficulty draining their sinuses and their ears and mucus builds up, creates an inflammation, it's a viral infection, not a bacterial infection, but the medical system still puts them on antibiotics, and then the antibiotics destroy their gut. All of these are signs of trouble coming. All of these add up to more sympathetic dominance. They stress the nervous system. Each of them individually is stressful as heck to the baby and the toddler's developing nervous system. At that stage of development, you'll hear me say this all the time, that is the most critical or sensitive stage of neurological development. Autism is a neurological condition. Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition. It's neurodevelopment gone haywire. Now, what happens then is we have to look at the nervous system and we have to say, okay, it is extremely sensitive during these critical periods of development. What is it sensitive to? Stress in all forms. Physical stress, birth trauma, forceps, vacuum, manual assistance, a child, a long, prolonged labor, stuck in the birth canal for 5 hours. There's a lot of manual, physical trauma to a child's head, neck, and spine and their delicate little neck and body during birth. Honestly, a lot of times, even when it goes optimally. A vaginal non-intervention birth, again, plead the fifth for the second time. I am a dude talking about the neurobiomechanics of birth, not a walk in the park for the baby's head and neck for anyone involved in that. So the nervous system for a baby is extremely sensitive to physical stress, specifically around the head and neck, because what can a baby not do? Hold up their head and neck, use their muscles or motor system at all. Second, chemical stress. I say it this way all the time. Kids and chemicals don't mix. They shouldn't be ingested, they shouldn't be inhaled, and they shouldn't be injected, because kids and chemicals don't mix. Many of the chemicals that are in our foods, in our environments, and in our medications and medical interventions, they are what are called neurostimulatory or neuromimicry and neurotoxic chemicals. They mimic, guess what? The sympathetic nervous system. When those chemicals get into the body is intelligent. The body has a really incredible immune system. Even when it's not functioning very well, it's functioning enough to know you're not supposed to be in here. You are foreign. Just like it would with a bacteria or a virus, we would hope that it would create a reaction, inflammation. And it does. And so neuroinflammation comes from exposure to too many toxins during the early, and sensitive periods of development. So physical trauma during the early, before a child can develop their own motor system, and even then a physical trauma to the neck and to the brainstem. What happens to a child with a concussion in high school football? How's their brain performance? How's their concentration? How's their mood regulation? How's their speech formation? Why do we ask them to remember? Why do we ask them to remember things? Why do we ask them to communicate? Because their neck is also injured with the brain, and that's where these things. So physical trauma, big deal. Chemical trauma, big deal. And then a high-stress pregnancy, big deal. So the whole first theory here we're buttoning up is even in regressive autism cases, when most of these parents were told everything's going, and they reported to us, and we have to be the ones who finally, and this is the worst part of my job. This episode is the worst part of my job. I got to open the hood and shine the light on things that nobody else ever did for you. I got to go backwards to help your family go forwards. But if we don't go forward, if we don't go backwards, we don't go upstream, and we tell you the truth that these things are real stressors and real problems and real triggers of neurodevelopmental problems down the road, including regressive autism, then if you don't know what the triggers are and you don't know what the cause is, you don't know what to address. And that's why this backstory, even though the least pleasant part of my job, is the most important part of my job. And so when we look at this toxic load perfect storm theory, it's an aggregate, it's an accumulation of stressors in all the different forms early and often that lead to trouble. Now, this early exposure to physical stress, chemical stress, and emotional stress actually does give signs. Let's contrast these two signs because they both matter, these two groups. So I got my notes up here. I'm actually going to read through these, okay? The typical early signs of autism are avoids or doesn't like eye contact, fails to respond to their name when called, unable to point at objects or things of interest or failure to show interest, generally wants to be alone, withdrawals, fails to understand or acknowledge other people's feelings as well as their own. So lack of social emotional development, experiences echolalia, or the tendency to repeat words or phrases uttered by other people or shows or whatever it may be, things that are seemingly random, a movie they watched 6 months ago, and they're still repeating it all the time. Tends to give unrelated answers to questions asked to them. Obsessive interest, loves to flap hands, spin in circles, rock or sway the body, gets upset by minor changes in daily activities, so that's the sensory system brewing, they can't handle transitions, exhibits low to zero social skills, shows unusual reactions like oversensitivity to certain things or undersensitivity. So that's sensory again. The root of autism is sensory processing challenges. The root of sensory processing challenges is subluxation and dysautonomia. Once you can connect those dots, you'll be able to make sense of every kind of autism and neurosensory challenge forever. No matter what the title of the episode says, we're coming back to imbalance of the nervous system, dysregulation of the nervous system. One of the earlier episodes, we interviewed our boss lady from our office, just a world changer, by Miss Jackie. Jackie's son, Logan, was the perfect storm. They were told, oh, everything's fine. Don't worry. He'll grow out of it. He had what made me think to pause here. He had oversensitivity. He could not sleep. He could not wear certain clothes. He could not go to the store without meltdowns, but he also had undersensitivity. He could be bleeding and he would show no bother. That's how off track his sensory nervous system was. The couple more typical signs of early signs of autism: tends to reverse the pronouns and use you instead of I, detests or avoids physical contact unless it's real deep. There's a bit of an asterisk to that, unless it's real deep pressure, demonstrates little attention to safety and is greatly unaware of danger. That was another big issue with Logan. Now that is the list of typical early signs of autism. And I could not be happier that more sites on the internet and more social media and more doctors and more early interventions and more people know that we can actually start to see signs of autism in the first 18 months. It used to be, even just a couple years ago, a little bit controversial to talk about early signs of autism in babies, early signs of autism in toddlers. That list right there is no longer controversial at all. And pediatricians, even conventional ones, should be talking to parents about these things, should be identifying these things, and then should be saying, okay, we need to do some early intervention. Now, even with that pathway, which is better, earlier, more aware, more identification, more understanding than ever before, it's still missing. It's missing two things. First, it's missing another list of things to identify as troublemakers. So I'm going to give you that list before we're done. And then second, it's missing, okay, we know trouble's brewing. What do we do about it? And the list of things that they recommend, even when they identify it, traditional movement-based therapies, and so forth, ABA, are fantastic. Literally, I have interviewed on this podcast our rockstar PTs we work with, our rockstar speech therapists we work with, our rockstar behavioral therapists we work with. We have an ABA whole team coming in to have a conversation with me. We could not love those interventions more, and those interventions couldn't love neurologically focused chiropractic more because they see this happen. When they take care of a kiddo, even if they get them early, and that kid is not getting adjusted, the results are limited. When they take care of a kiddo, especially if they get them early, and the child is getting neurologically focused chiropractic, their results are 1 + 1 = 111. So let me finish why that second part and adding that to a child's early intervention and care team is so essential, because the next list we're going to talk about, see, the list we just went through, those aren't the causes of regressive autism. Those are just signs of it brewing. So signs are just another word for symptoms. Their effects, all of those challenges that we just went through on that bullet point, those are symptoms. Those are abnormal expressions. Those are things that are coming out or not coming out of your child's behavior and responsiveness and expression, but it doesn't tell us what's actually going on the inside. It doesn't tell us what triggered and what is the neurophysiological dysfunction and the neurosensory neurodevelopmental problems on the inside of their brain, body, and nervous system, if you will. This next list and my next explanation will. So what are the way too commonly overlooked signs of autism that I will do this podcast episode, and we will make social media posts, and we will put on YouTube, and we will talk about till the end of our days. Even if it ticks a few people off, we will tell the neurophysiological truth about the perfect storm and about the toxic load and about subluxation, dysautonomia, and what we're talking about here. First off, I already went through them before, but they're so important because no one else is talking about them. I'm going to go through my list a bit more organized than I did during the introduction when I was already, because here's the deal. Whenever I'm in an introduction, I'm already in the meat of the conversation because I'm a raging bull and I am so excited to get you the information. I may sneak in a farmer story and a dad joke or two, but we're getting right into what you need to know. So let's go through this for the third time. The most commonly overlooked signs of regressive autism brewing are infant challenges, such as difficulty latching and nursing, trouble soothing and sleeping, so that would be colic-like challenges. Next, let's go to the motor system. Either holding their head up too soon, too aggressive, too full of tension in their head, neck, and shoulders, or too late. Difficulty pushing up, rolling over, sitting up on their own. If they can't do it, they hate to do it. If they hate tummy time, that's a big negative sign. Frequent arching of their back or neck, stiffening, tensing, screaming, typically that comes with callus. Torticollis or plagiocephaly, those are more obvious signs of subluxation, which is misalignment, fixation, and tension within the neurospinal system. So torticollis is the term for when the neck is stuck on one side, and plagiocephaly is the term for if you ever see a baby out in public and they have that helmet on, they're trying to remold. And again, the helmet is doing what we could do chiropractically without the helmet. But plagiocephaly is where there's a flat head or a misshapen head. That is a sign. That is a structural issue caused by a neurological dysfunction. Okay. So when they put the helmet on and they're just taking care of the structure, but not the neurological cause of it, it's better, but it's not getting to the root cause. And that child, even after the helmet comes off, and a lot of kiddos who do physical therapy only for torticollis, but not chiropractic, to really get to the neurological component, that doesn't go away. I see torticollis in teenagers all the time because they got done. They graduated out of PT, but they didn't get done with the neurological problem of it. Continuing the motor system and missed milestones that are really motor tone coordination challenges. Delayed crawling or skipping it all together, and delayed walking. These are signs of trouble brewing. Digestive and immune system. Let's look under that part. If we're opening the hood, we're looking at these different parts. Continued bouts of reflux, excessive spit up, or even vomiting. Colic, continuous crying. So we're kind of right back to that. Chronic constipation and eczema. Frequent and recurrent, especially recurrent, ear infections and other respiratory infections like croup, RSV. If your little one is just constantly sick and congested all the time, eventually the neuroimmune system and the neuroinflammatory cascade is going to get so off track, it can contribute to the overwhelm, which will kick them over the cliff and cause regressive challenges. And then frequent use of medications such as antibiotics, nebulizers, and so forth contributes to this toxic load theory. And then let's just say it one more time. There's plenty of other podcasts, plenty of other influencers and incredible people out there helping us with this. So I choose to speak about this less than others because that allows me the space to speak about the neurological components, birth trauma, subluxation more. But toxins, big deal. Kids and chemicals don't mix. If they are ingested food, inhaled, or in environment, or injected medications, vaccinations, we have to take that into the conversation. And if those chemicals are going into a child's nervous system that is already constipated, that is already chronically sick, that already has neurological dysfunction, then what happens is if subluxation, sympathetic dominance, dysautonomia is already there from birth or before, that child's nervous system is out of balance. The nervous system controls the digestive system, including motility, absorption, assimilation, and elimination and detoxification. If that child's nervous system is out of balance, even if the signs are subtle, and even if the pediatrician says, oh, they're a little grumpy, they're a little fussy, they're a little colicky, don't worry, they'll grow out of it, that's trouble brewing neurologically, and it'll mess with not only their digestive system, but their immune system. The nervous system and the immune system are linked at the hip. And when the nervous system goes into sympathetic dominance, it goes into a pro-inflammatory state. If you really want to learn more about the neurological control of gut function and limiting detoxification, if you've tried to detox your child and you've tried to get your child's inflammatory markers done, let's say you've done a Zoomer, you've done blood work, you've done food mapping, you've done allergy testing, you've done all the different functional integrated medicine tests, and you know your child's full of toxins, you know your child's gut's a mess, you know your child's microbiome is off, and you know your child is inflamed, and you've already taken clean diet, supplements, and everything else, and you stop putting chemicals in and you still can't get the chemicals out. This is the conversation you need to hear because their nervous system gets jacked up first. There, I'll say it the Tony way. Their nervous system gets sympathetic dominant first, and downstream physiologically, it messes with the motor system. That's huge. That contributes to autism. It messes with the digestive system and throws that off track. That, in and of itself, microbiome, gut-brain connection, huge contributor to troubles later on with autism and brain-based challenges later on. And it messes with the immune system as well, and it leaves it in a pro-inflammatory state, even with perfect diet, detoxes, and so forth, and that contributes to brain-based challenges. So when we look at regressive autism and we really finish this, we round third base with this one and we say, okay, specifically regressive autism, what is going on? This last section is going to blow your mind because we're going to teach you some advanced neurology through a really, really, really simple Iowa farmer lens. To do this, I need to come back and I need to spend a minute or two teaching you about subluxation and sympathetic dominance, which I've referred to a ton and will in every episode, just a bit more. Subluxation is a neurological dysfunction, dysregulation, dysautonomia. What happens is subluxation is not a static thing. It's not just one thing. It is a progressive negative thing. Subluxation gets worse because it throws the child's developmental track off. So then it creates more problems, hence why we call it the perfect storm or a vicious cycle. Because once it begins, the thread unravels further and more not good things show up. If we take subluxation and we talk about it in a progressive stage, we can do that too. And there's 3 progressive stages to subluxation. First, this is how God designed us. When we are exposed to stress of any kind, physical, chemical, emotional, our nervous system goes into fight or flight. So the acute response to stress is exactly what it should be, sympathetic dominance. Right now, throughout this episode and pretty much every other one, I always make sympathetic dominance out to be the bad guy. It's actually a good guy. It's your startle reflex. It's your choking reflex. For adults, it's driving down the road and a deer runs out in front of you. You don't want to have to think, oh, look at that deer. He weighs about 90 pounds. He's going about 4 miles per hour. I'm going 37 miles per hour. I better calculate my muscles to do this to the brake. No. We need our sympathetic nervous system for survival because that's what it does, which also means it doesn't do anything. In fact, it gets in the way of thrival and development. It gets in the way of growth. You can't be in growth and development at the same time. So we're talking only right now about the first stage of subluxation, sympathetic dominance, and that's bad in and of itself. A baby should be the opposite of sympathetic dominance. What is a baby supposed to do? Eat, sleep, poop, relax, and just take it easy, right? They're supposed to be in parasympathetic mode, rest, relaxation, digestion. So the first stage of subluxation is sympathetic dominance. Second, and this is specifically a pediatric description of subluxation, now the second thing that happens with subluxation is you create what I call neurological confusion. When a child is stuck early on in sympathetic dominance, the pediatrician most commonly is going to miss it. I have to say that one more time, they're going to dismiss these things as normal. Don't worry, they'll grow out of it. They're not. They're signs of neurophysiological dysfunction, subluxation, and sympathetic dominance. Once that kicks in early and often and stays stuck there, it's going to throw development off track. The first system it will throw off track is the motor system. That's where delayed motor milestones and why they become so important. The second system that subluxation and sympathetic dominance will throw off track, so category 2, phase 2 of subluxation progression, it'll mess with digestion. You'll have altered digestive function. The third system, if you will, it steals energy from and creates this confusion. This second stage is what we call neurological dysfunction or confusion, is the immune system. You'll have a dysregulated immune system. The fourth stage is the endocrine system. You'll have altered hormonal and endocrine function. And the fifth, and I'm separating these for the fact of you being able to learn them, they happen all at once. This all starts to go downstream altogether real fast. It goes in this sequence, but it kind of happens all at once because it's just happening so quickly. And the fifth one is sensory processing. That's why a child struggles with transitions, struggles with certain clothing, struggles to try new foods. So an infant who really struggles to try new foods, to swallow, chew them, and digest them, that's a sign of autism and regressive challenges showing up. And the third thing is what's really going to have us round third base with this episode and explain regressive autism better than anybody else ever has. That wasn't real more better English, but we're rolling with it. The third stage of subluxation is when it's called, my mentor, Dr. David Fletcher, taught it to me because I was getting his help to make sense of some of these tough cases in my clinic. And he said, well, you know how the sympathetic system works, don't you? He's so brilliant. Sometimes he thinks we know what we know. I got to get Dr. Fletcher on here. We got to nerd out together. He's the world's foremost expert in HRV, which measures everything we're talking about, heart rate variability. If you wear an Apple Watch, a Whoop, an Oura Ring, or a Garmin, you have a rudimentary version of HRV. We use a very advanced version of HRV from Dr. Fletcher's company in our offices. And what we see on regressive autism cases on HRV is what's called neurological exhaustion. When anyone's nervous system, but a child who goes through the perfect storm is going to be susceptible to this the most and the earliest, after you've been stressed, wound up, stage 1, disorganized, asymmetrical, off track developmentally, stage 2, for the majority of your life, you eventually go into neurological depletion and exhaustion. What we find with our kiddos who went into regressive autism and just flat shut down developmentally is they just flat shut down neurologically. Their nervous system has likely been under severe amounts of sympathetic strain and stress since fertility, throughout pregnancy and that fetal development we talked about. From labor and delivery, there was likely high amounts of physical trauma to their brainstem and their vagus nerve during the birth process. And then they were colicky, they were fussy, they were constipated, they were chronic ear infections. Then they got antibiotics, then they got other interventions. And it's just been a non-stop onslaught of stress. Now, here's where it all comes together. You're like, wait a minute, though. Wouldn't that show more signs? One, we talked about signs that parents should be informed and empowered to look for. Not in a doomsday, not in a holy crap way, but hey, let's handle this way. And then second, here's what I got to close this down with. It's actually good news. And I'm going to go to this so we can segue into action, how to help a child who fits this criteria of this conversation today. Children are ridiculously, mind-blowingly resilient and adaptable. They can go through these things. And for 6 months and 18 months or 6 months and 12 months and 18 months, they can still be moving forward. Their nervous system is so resilient, so adaptable, it can just get onslaughted with this perfect storm and this toxic, conventional, American, and most developed countries are all the same. We can just onslaught our kids with stress and toxicity and crap. I'm just giving my Iowa term for it. The accumulation of crap-tastic stuff there. That's real advanced for you. So you don't miss this. And they can make their way through it for a period of time until their nervous system has become so stressed, so wound up, and so off track for so long that it gives up. And regressive autism is neurological depletion. The challenge when kiddos have challenges with sensory, with autism, you could categorize every neurological condition in a child as them being in a maladaptive state. The nervous system's job is adaptability, resiliency, handling stress, handling good stress, what's called eustress, good stress and bad stress, and making your way through it. God actually designed our kids to be developed in an amazing way. They have a lot of development yet to do, but they're actually born ridiculously plastic. That's a good thing, meaning like pliable, resilient. It's incredible how much adaptability and resiliency is inside a child's nervous system. I always knew that. And then actually through my specialty, in the toughest of cases, our clinic sees more tough cases flying from all over the world than any other chiropractor I think in the history of time has ever seen. And through the toughest cases, I see the awesomeness of a child's resiliency. I see the potential of their healing capacity, because how else did they freaking even get through those 12 to 18 months and try and crawl a little bit, try and walk a little bit, try and talk a little bit, try and socialize a little bit. The fact that some of these kiddos with regressive autism did any of it is incredible. And actually, in those cases, it often means your child's resiliency and adaptability is actually pretty high. The fact that they made it 10, 12, 18 months down the road before they fell off the road or off this metaphoric neurophysiological cliff. And so what I want to turn the corner and send you into action with is this. If this conversation to the T fits your kiddo, or even closely somewhat fits your kiddo, then now you really understand neurophysiology gone haywire. So you also understand how to get it back online. Now, we cannot go back and change the fertility journey. We cannot change the pregnancy journey. We cannot change our birth. My child's birth was as traumatic as it could get. I can listen to Oliver's story, one of the first episodes on this podcast. That was not the plan. We can't go back and we change that. We can't change the fact that his brainstem and his hypoxic brain damage was so bad that he went from one hospital in a helicopter to another through multiple surgeries. Oliver's case history was awful. But I also knew neurophysiologically what that was going to do to his development if I didn't step in and do something about it. And I don't have any other way to say it to you than this. We can't go backwards, but we can. My team will laugh when they hear this one. My phrase for everything, whether it's talking about systems in our practice or a child's nervous system, fix it forward. I kind of have a funky job. I am the most obsessed with case history and backstory doctor you'll ever meet. And in the same frame, once we have that case history and we do what we call perfect storm pattern analysis, and we can make sense of why a child, and for regressive families, I think it's so relieving. It's frustrating. It's disheartening. I know it ticks you off that nobody told you this before, but hang with me, feel with me right here, moms and dads. Now you know. And once you know, now you can finally do something about it. And that's why we do this. That's why we go back to explain every little granular detail, including the 3 parts of subluxation, sympathetic dominance, neurological confusion, and then exhaustion. And that lack of adaptability, those kiddos who are now in this level 3 regressive nonverbal autism, they're not just struggling to adapt. They're not adapting at all. They are literally shut down, locked in, locked out of the life that they deserve to live. So what we need to do is to get into their nervous system, and we need to get them out of the neurologically exhaustive state. This is what we call neurological. Often for these tough regressive autism cases, I'm going to give you the action plan going forward, and I'm not going to sugarcoat any of it. I'm not going to sidestep any of it. I'm not going to go, oh, you might want to. I'm going to tell you what works for these kiddos to have absolute transformations in their quality of life, to get their nervous system better and address their root cause, and many kids heal a ton. Each kid is different. So can I say, oh, this for every kid is going to be this? No, I can't, especially not on this platform. And I will tell you this right out of the gates. Nothing we do, neurologically-focused chiropractic, is not a treatment or a cure for autism of any kind. Not regressive autism, not level 3 autism, not nonverbal autism, not level 2 autism, not level 1 autism, not ear infections, not back pain, not headaches, not nothing. Chiropractic does not cure. The body does. The nervous system does. We tap into the nervous system and get it working better, and the healing happens from the inside out. We are experts in doing that. your child's nervous system is the hero, and really you are the hero in the story for finding this podcast, finding the doctors, getting them on your team, and making sure this happens. When a child has severe regressive autism, they need a significant amount of neurologically focused chiropractic care. PT, OT, speech, ABA, developmental therapies, so helpful. They're going to try and work on secondary and tertiary offshoot elements of the storm. Neurologically focused chiropractic is going to go right into the frickin' eye of the storm. Nobody can change neurology, central, autonomic nervous system function, vagus nerve function. Nobody can address sympathetic dominance, parasympathetic exhaustion, subluxation, nervous system dysregulation, dysfunction, dysautonomia like we can with this kind of chiropractic. Is it ordinary chiropractic? No. But are all chiropractors capable of doing it? Yes. They just need to listen to this podcast episode too, because school doesn't teach us this stuff. Clinic and life experience through Oliver taught it to me, and then we went and put it together for you. So you need a high, I don't like this word, but I'm going to use it so you don't miss what I need your kiddo to get better. They need a high dose of chiropractic. If you have a level 3 nonverbal, neurologically depleted, regressive autism kiddo, then you can't sugarcoat it and you can't do a little bit of chiropractic. This is the kind of chiropractic that typically needs to be met with high dosage, which is just my word for relatability of high frequency. They need to get adjusted often, especially in the initial stages, because their nervous system is depleted. The first thing we need to address is the neurological exhaustion. So I don't normally do this on the podcast where I get this into the weeds with how chiropractic works, but these cases are tough. And so parents, you're tough and you're going to need to be tougher than ever to put this all together. So I'm just going to give it to you. So number one, they need to get adjusted with high frequency. When a child's nervous system is extremely exhausted, dysregulated, and imbalanced, it's also highly sensitive. So we can't over-adjust. This is why right now, for many of your cases, if you're doing 17 things all at once, each of them individually on paper may look great, but you might have actually reached a plateau where your child might actually be regressing further. And you're like, what the heck is happening? The more I do, I wanted to do these stool samples. I'm biomedical, I'm integrative, I'm functional, I'm ABA, I'm neurofeedback, I'm primitive reflexes. I got their tongue tie clipped. I'm adding these supplements. I'm adding these herbs. I'm adding these homeopathics. If that's you, I'm kind of sneaking in a bunch of episodes into one here. If you've gone full throttle, and I know many moms who find this podcast have, you right now are doing everything, or at least have done everything in the past for your kiddo, and you're on your last freaking shred of hope, because the more you do, the less it seems to work. I need you to, I'm going to give you a little preview of it, and then I need you to scroll up a little bit and listen to an episode that is titled, When Nothing Works. That episode will take this part of my conversation today and blow your mind with how less is more. Well, when it comes to chiropractic adjusting, each individual adjustment, less is more. But to a child who is this neurologically exhausted, more is more too in terms of frequency. So what I love about our intensive programs is we can do a lot and a little at the same time. So we will typically work with kiddos daily, if not twice a day, for the first 2 to 4 weeks in a case of regressive autism. After that, they often need to stay at 3 times a week adjustments, a high frequency of adjustments, for months and months and months, because we have to heal their nervous system in reverse through what's called neurological restoration and reorganization. These are the care plans. This is what our doc network is trained in. No one else really is. This is what we do differently, especially than anybody else. And we have to address the exhaustion first and just get your child's nervous system adapting again. Just get them trying again. What actually often happens for our cases of nonverbal autism kiddos is all of a sudden, once we start to get them adjusted, they start to heal from the inside out, and they heal sequentially. They finally start to sleep better. They finally start to eat, digest, and poop better. They finally have less congestion, inflammation, and immune challenges, so their immune system gets stronger. They get less congested. If they do, they get through it a lot quicker. They definitely don't need medications to get through it. We're able to handle it naturally without drugs. And then the real kicker, because autism lives in the sensory motor system, we will see their stimming and their motor planning improve so much more in the early stages. Now, I want to close it by putting those are called the neurological soft signs of healing. So sleep, digestion, immune function, motor planning. And then the fifth one is kind of like the cross section into the brain, sensory processing. So just less sensory overwhelm. They can get a haircut. They can get a bath. They can wear certain clothes. When parents start to tell us this, man, do we know we're turning the corner to brain-based healing. And so we see healing happen in this order and sequentially. If you take those first 4 things especially, and I want to teach this to you because it's so simple. I told you we go nerdy and neurological. We just did, and now let's close it with the simple. We got to get the body better first to get the brain better. Now, autism ends up in the brain, but it begins in the body. That is why the perfect storm with physical trauma and chemical trauma getting into the body, getting into the brainstem, getting into the neurospinal system, that's chiropractic, getting into the gut, that's toxins, that wreaks havoc on the nervous system early and often during those sensitive periods. The body gets off track developmentally. The motor system gets off track. The digestive system gets off track. The immune system gets off track. And the sensory system gets off track. And sleep is usually completely out of whack too. It's kind of its own thing. It's a very neurological thing. Well, in order to get the brain better, speech, communication, socialization, behavioral and emotional regulation, and cognition, we need to get the body better first. So for closing this conversation, we've got to separate the body from the brain when it comes to healing interventions. What neurologically-focused chiropractic does is we're able to access the brain more directly, more potently, more sequentially, because we get the nervous system and its control of basic physiological functions online first. It is wildly intricate, complicated, and amazing, and simultaneously simple. And my prayer is that through this episode, you see it all, you understand it all, and it makes sense what happened, what's missing from getting your kiddo better, and where to go next. So here's where to go next. Find your PX doc. You've got to find a doc who, 1, knows what the heck is going on and cares enough to be up to date on the research about epigenetics, about fertility challenges, maternal distress, birth trauma, perfect storm, toxic load, so forth. Trust me, your PX docs know that. You find a PX docs in your region, they know that better than anybody else because I taught it to them. So I'm telling you, they were paying attention because if anybody falls asleep in my class, I walk over to them and I smack them upside the head. Just kidding. Never had to do that, but I would. Number 2. This is kids we're talking about. Ain't no sleeping in my class. Besides, look at me. I'm crazy. Look at me. You're listening on a podcast, but maybe you're watching on YouTube. I teach this, the certification program is 80 hours, and then they need to keep training every single month to remain access on those docs on the direct are trained. Let me just summate that. And our training has this energy that you hear on this podcast every hour all the way through. When you go find your PX doctor, ask them, be like, hey, Dr. Tony's pretty full freaking throttle on the podcast. What's he like in your guys' academic nerd classes? They'd be like, oh, he's full freaking throttle in those classes as well. Number 2, so that's the doctor you need, the one that knows enough to ask the questions early and deep enough. Number 2, they will take that thorough case history. You know you're in the right doctor's office when they ask questions that nobody else has. If you go to a doctor or provider, anybody, fill in the blank professional, and they're basically going through the same steps that the other doctors and the other professionals you've already seen are doing, don't expect different results. So they got to go through a very thorough case history to find your child's triggers. I went through this part of my job. I kind of have like a love-loathe relationship with it because I have to PowerPoint this on these podcasts and on Perfect Storm workshops. I've got a journal. I got to put it all together for everybody all at once. Now, I don't do that clinically, and neither does your doc. We put your kids together, your kids' plan together by taking their case history individually in depth. That's what sets us apart as well. Every kid, every family deserves individualized. So even though I went through the big blocks of the perfect storm and the toxic load, every kid is different. Some have it all, some have some of it, some have different things that I didn't even cover here. We will find them. Number 3, you need to find and measure this neurological dysfunction, subluxation, and dysautonomia. You must I'm getting pushed. The more podcast episodes I push out, the more pushier I seem to be getting. This must be God's plan for the development of this thing. You must get into a PX doc's office, not only for that consultation, conversation, and the explanation that'll finally give you the answers you've been up late at night searching for, but all of that is information. And whoever said knowledge is power, didn't hold all that much power. The implementation of knowledge is power. For us to implement and provide the care we do, we need our neurological insight scans. They're called neurothermal, EMG, and then HRV. They're very, very, very visual. There's a lot of pattern analysis on these scans. There's a lot of colors on these scans. There's most importantly a lot of metrics and math to these scans. So it's impossible kind of to make sense of them on a podcast, which is verbal only. So on every single one of our shows, we put in the show notes a link to our article and visuals that we wrote about the insight scans. Go to the website, learn about these insight scans, and then immediately, or learn about the insight scans when you get your child in the office and you get your kid scans, because that's what I'm saying. Get your child's scan. Get to the directory, get in the office, get these scans. That's where you can find out if your child's nervous system is sympathetic dominant, dysregulated, and exhausted. And I'm telling you, there is a pattern, and our docs are trained to identify it. There is a pattern, a very specific subluxation, neurological dysfunction, dysautonomia pattern to regressive autism and level 3 nonverbal autism. And your docs are trained to find it on the scans as well as the case history. And once we have those pieces, we put them all together, and then we sit down with you and your kiddo and your spouse, and we say, here's what we found, here's what it is, here's what it means, and here's what we can do about it. Again, not here's how we treat it, not here's how we cure it. Here's how we get your child's nervous system no longer exhausted, no longer disorganized, and no longer stuck in sympathetic dominance. We get it calm, we get it relaxed, we get it regulated, we get the communication between the brain and the body, we get all those systems back online, sleep, digestion, immune function, and most importantly, if I had to say one that I triple tap on again and again, motor planning, tone, and coordination. Nothing out there improves those physiological and neurological functions like neurologically-focused chiropractic. Those are the keys in aggregate to healing a child whose brain is locked into autism. The brain is doing what the body tells it to do. If the body is completely subluxated, discombobulated, and off track and stuck in the perfect storm, we've got to start there. Your mission going forward, if you have not done it yet, is get your kiddo into a PX doc office, get these scans. These scans continue to show change. If you're listening to this and you're like, I've done that, we're a month in, we're a week in, we're a couple of months in, we haven't seen change yet. That's why on this one, I kind of wanted to go a little deeper into the chiropractic innards than I normally do. It takes a long time. If we go back to most regressive autism and just autism period case histories, that stress started either even before development and conception. I know that's wild, but that's what we know now about epigenetics. We know that the storm began to brew and did likely was brewing throughout your child's entire developmental tract, neurodevelopmental tract. All they've known is sympathetic dominance and neurological dysfunction. So to install a new and improved neurological software and operating system takes a long time, and it can take a lot of adjustments. And I think we're just at this place with you guys, our amazing audience, either brand new folks. If you're brand new, you got a fire-breathing dragon on this one. I'm not really chill on the other ones either, because you don't need me to be chill. You need me to tell you the truth and help your family get out of the storm. And so if you've been listening, you've under care, and you're there, I know that you want these changes, especially with the stimming and the nonverbal and the overwhelm and all the challenges that come with regressive autism and level 3 autism. They are immense, and they are every day, and they are all the time. And I know you want them gone yesterday, but I want you to really focus on the science that we taught on this episode and understand that the storm happens in a specific sequence. So does healing. And as long as those scans are getting better as care progresses, as long as those soft signs, sleep, digestion, immune function, and most importantly, motor planning, tone and coordination are getting better, and sensory transitions as care progresses, little things in the early stages matter massively. And they tell us for sure you're on track. Again, your docs, everything I say here into this microphone to this audience, I've trained thousands. Well, we have just short of 1,000 right now. We will soon be in the thousands. We will soon be all over Australia. We will soon be all over the UK. We will soon be all over South America, Mexico, Canada, everywhere. Yes, even Canadians, we love you too. We always have, okay? So we're coming for you as well. And when I talk to you, I'll just say words like process versus process. And for Australians and New Zealanders, we'll put all sorts of extra vowels into our words when we say pediatrics and those things. I just felt like I should lighten the mood because I've been pretty serious here towards the end. But I need you to know this. We've got this. We know what's going on, even in the toughest of cases, like autism, like regressive autism. So this is not a sugar-coated podcast. This is a truth-telling, neuroscience deep diving podcast that doesn't exist out there. I listen to Huberman every single episode, 2 hours, 4 hours at a time. I've listened to his episodes about autism. They're barking up the right tree-ish. They haven't got to the roots. Not even close. They're not going to get to the roots at Stanford. They're not going to get to the roots at Harvard. They're not going to get to the roots at Northwestern. They're not going to get to the roots in the medical system because they're looking with the wrong lens. The answers lie in a different kind of doctor who's got a different kind of philosophy and perspective that allows them to see the science more clearly. This is the direction to go for you and your family. And my last request, as always, please share, please subscribe, please download. I love doing this so much. I'm probably do a poor job of asking for that. We appreciate every review, every share, every Instagram. It's so cool to see it on Instagram and see it linked. It's awesome that we can now add URLs and links into Instagram stories. People are like, you Instagram rock stars. You're like, that's been happening for a long time, Grandpa. I know, but I still, where's Tom and MySpace? Sometimes I just get a little overwhelmed by Instagram. All right. A little sympathetic dominant, a little neurologically exhausted by Instagram because I'm in my mid-40s and I grew up on a farm and I'm a dude. And right now, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm just holding my hands up like a weirdo. So I think that's a sign to myself, even though I'm the only one in the studio right now, to shut this podcast episode down and ask you to share the heck out of it, especially in the autism community. Please get this one in those Facebook groups and out there. I love you. I appreciate you. I am so grateful for you. And hear me on this one. I believe in you, moms and dads and other kick-ass providers who listen to this podcast and go, give me them answers. I'm going to get to work and I'm going to get my kid better. I believe in every one of you, and I really, 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 really believe in your kiddo. Whether I never get to meet you, but I got to meet your PX doctor and train them, and they get to take care of you. You just need to feel me and hear me on this one. I believe in your mom and dad. I believe in your kiddo. I know what's possible, and it's miracles. So you should expect them, and through this podcast and the connections we can make for your family, you can experience them. God bless. Be well. See you on the next one.